Hi, today I'm starting on another project. This is a Hydrogear ZT3100 transaxle, and this one actually, you'll find this transmission, if you want to call it a transaxle, in a lot of mowers. This is the entry-level commercial size one, like I said, the ZT3100. Now you'll find a lot of different options depending on what sort of equipment that it's placed in. So I have taken this one out of a Exmark or TORO, if you will, stand-on aerator. And what you'll find about this transaxle is that it's slightly different than most of the ones you'll see with the mowers, because it has this sprocket on it. So the shaft, the drive shaft, it's the axle shaft that has a big gear on it in here, comes through here, and it's actually different on the outside than most mowers. Most of the time the mower will have a shaft that's about 4.5 inches long right here, and on the outside will have a hub where your lug nuts are and you bolt the wheel on. In this case, the aerator is driven by a chain, and it controls the wheels and the tines. So the shaft here is different than your standard one. It has a sprocket mounted on it. It's not quite as long. Also, you'll find different options sometimes with the pulleys. And I don't know if this has to do with the gear reduction, or if it's actually, there's gears in here. And we're going to take this apart and check, and I'll tell you why. So this transaxle obviously is not working properly. It started to lose power. It'll chatter when you try to move forward or reverse, and you lose power so that it wants to not go forward or backwards when engaged. This is basically where your lever hooks up to, right up here, that engages the transaxle forward and backwards. This is a brake right here, and this area, or I'm sorry, this is not a brake, this is a hydro release valve right here, and this is a hose where your reservoir goes in. Now a couple things you can always check on these to start with is on the bottom right here, this is called a charge pump, and on a lot of mowers, you can see other videos on YouTube, you can check the charge pump in here in the seals, and they happen to go bad. A lot of times you can do that without removing this whole transaxle unit from the machine. However, like I said, being off an aerator, there's a large skid plate that covers the whole bottom of this, and you cannot access this with it on the equipment. So I had to take this off either way. First thing we're going to check is this charge pump assembly right here, and we're going to go from there. You can see the filter's already beat up because I've already drained the oil. I put this back on it because I wanted to clean the whole thing before I disassembled it. So that's what I've done. So my plan here is to actually go piece by piece and just sort of check a couple things. We'll start with the charge pump, and then after that, if it looks good, then we'll go ahead and take the case apart. My plan here is not to rebuild this whole thing if I don't have to, and I'll tell you why. Because this is made for an aerator, it's sort of specialized, so you have to go to TORO and buy this whole unit if you don't rebuild it. And it's pretty expensive because it's specialized for an aerator. You know, they ordered this spec'd out just the way they wanted it. So if you try to order this from TORO right now, this is August of 22 when I'm making this video. This whole unit here is about we'll call it $1,200 to $1,400 depending on where you get it. Oh, that's pretty pricey. Plan A is to take this apart, see any obvious damages. If it looks like it's simple damage, it's not terribly costly to get the parts to fix it, then I might just go ahead and fix this one. You know, I can wrap up in rebuilding the whole thing, and in parts I could easily see wrapping up a few $100s in it. I know the seal kit on the thing is going to be I think it's 50 to 75 bucks for the seal kit. You got other parts in here. I could easily see, no problem, anywhere from say you know, 200 or more just in parts, depending on what I find inside of it. So anyway, that's the background on this. Let's keep moving forward. First thing I'm going to do here is, like I said, take this charge pump off. Let's get to it. Now, what you can find, there's a lot of videos on the internet of how to disassemble and repair these piece by piece. So I'm not going to go through all of that. I'm just going to disassemble this thing, and I'll kind of speed up the video if you want to see it. If you have any specifics, I'm going to stop at a couple areas that I think are more primary that we can look for. So anything super important, I'm maybe going to stop and let you know what I see right there. Otherwise, I'm just going to start to disassemble this thing and stop as I go. So if you need a detail every little step-by-step piece, I've found some other YouTubers out there that have those videos. You can watch those. In mine, I'm just going to try to get this thing apart and see what's going on. So now that I've got this transaxle apart, I've examined everything pretty carefully to try to figure out what the problem is. Unfortunately, in this situation, the problem is far from obvious. This is the center section of the transaxle, and these are where the cylinder blocks and the pistons do all their work at. So one of these sides, I think it's this one, is the pump, and this one's the motor side. So normally on a hydraulic pump, you will find if there's damage to the pump, you'll find scoring or marks or shavings or something. So as I took this whole thing apart, I didn't find any scoring, I didn't find any metal shavings, I didn't find any telltale signs of problems. You know, I really expected to see some damage on these surfaces right here, and I didn't. So that became a problem because I'm not exactly sure what the problem cause of the symptoms are. I checked the check valves, which there's two of them, one for front, one for back. You see I left one in so I didn't get them mixed up, but I checked them out well. Also, there is a pressure relief spring and it's right here, and there's a ball in the bottom here. I took out this roll pin. I checked that to make sure it was okay and not dirty in the bottom. But in essence, this looks nearly perfect. I can see just a tiniest little bit of wear on there, but I can even still see some cross hatching from the manufacturing. So that whole area looks good. So I examined it. I tried to figure out what was going on. Here is the cylinder block assemblies that would basically coincide onto here. And inside of these, there's a bearing. And I checked out the bearings and the races. They look perfect. Once again, the face of the cylinder block looks perfect. The pistons, they have springs in there, and they don't look scored up at all. So, after examining all this, couldn't find any problems, I decided that I was going to call Hydrogear. So I did that. I spoke to a guy in their tech department who was very helpful. I told him the situation. I told him that this is not the first time I've had a hydrostatic transmission apart, so I kind of know what to look for. Well, he did guide me in a couple things. He said, you know, sending pictures if I can't figure out the problem. Well, I don't think that's going to be an issue, because after discussing with him, there is one thing that I neglected to check. And he mentions that in these cylinder blocks, in these pistons, you need to take all these out and inspect the springs. And then you have to put them back in and see if you have any movement in any of this. He says you have to check each one of them all the way around. He said you take one that you know is good, and you basically work your way around on all of them to make sure that these are nice and tight and there's no play. So I started doing that, and this one actually looks just fine for the motor section. However, when I come over to this one, even though the face of the cylinder block looks good, and I turn it over and I started to inspect these, I noticed pretty quickly that especially one of them had some wobble right there. This one's wobbling. So on my initial inspection, I missed that. So this wobbling right here, I think, is the cause of where my pressure is leaking out of the pump. And that's probably why I'm losing my drive motion. Because basically this cylinder block here and this piston, probably this one exactly, is bad. This one especially. I get a little bit of play in this one also, but this one seems to be especially bad. So that's what I found in my searching and all this taken apart, and I found that. So my next step here is I got to call, find out how much this unit is, the cylinder block, and probably would have to replace the pistons and the springs. And then I have to decide whether it's worth it to do all that, or whether I should look into the other transaxle assembly that I mentioned before. So after I have a chance to do some research, get a little farther along, I'll restart this video and tell you what I came up with. Alright, so I got my parts in. This is what I found, like we saw, that was bad. This is the new cylinder block, and it comes with all the pistons and the washer and the springs already ready to go, just like that, out of the box. So that's a good deal. I'm going to lube this up. As I start the reassembly, I'm going to lubricate this really well with fresh oil. Then this one is the block for the pump. This is the block for the motor that I think was bad, because it's the only thing I could see with wear on it. And this is the one for the pump. I bought it also just because all this labor involved in taking this off. I wanted to make sure that I had a fresh pump in there too. This one I think cost me an extra maybe $100 or something like that to buy it. This one actually, strangely enough, was cheaper. I think this one here was only about $75 or something like that. It was quite cheap. So now I got these. I have my new seal kit, and this comes for all the seals in the whole thing, including the charge pump. So now I'm just going to start the reassembly. Of course, I got to clean up the old gasket stuff, take off the old O-rings, and then give it a cleaning, and then I'm going to start reassembly. So I'm going to get to it. Oh, one more note. Hydrogear on their website has a complete service manual you can just download. I printed out. I like to have a tangible one. And it has all the information you need to disassemble and reassemble every one of these components in this thing. Also, something valuable here is the torque values. So, you know, any special tools, and definitely the torques for every single item that you need to put together. So that's pretty important. So I suggest if you're taking it apart, you download one of these. So I'm going to get to it. It's going to take a little while. Okay, so I'm going to stop right here for a second because I had a lot of trouble getting this sprocket hub off the end of the shaft so that I could replace the seal that's behind it. There's a C-clip and a seal behind this. So I tried several times with my puller, and I've just got a 2-jaw puller, and I put it on like so, and I tried 4 or 5 times. I spent probably 15 minutes trying to get it off of there, and I realized it's going to be tough because it was just tight on there. If you look inside the shaft here, there's a little dimple, and that's where you're supposed to put your puller. That way you can pull this hub off. It wouldn't work for me, so what I did is I found another nut. So I found another nut that was the right size to go on the end of the shaft. And I just screwed it on there because I didn't want to mess up the end of the threads of the shaft when I did this. But I put a nut on there, just hand tight, and this is the lock nut that came off of the shaft. So I didn't use it because I didn't want to mess it up either, even though you really should use another lock nut when you reassemble it, but I don't have one, so I'm going to use this one. So I put another nut on there. Then I turned the whole thing up like this, and I took kind of a punch and I put it on here like this, and a hammer, and I just smacked it. And it took me about 5 smacks, and because of that, I was careful not to mess up the case, because this way all the pressure is going onto the nut on the shaft, and then the hub is forcing down. So since the shaft floats freely in here, back and forth, you don't really put any pressure on there. You can see that the hub will actually float freely, like so. So you're not really putting any pressure on the case at all. All you're putting pressure on, really, when you hit it, is this nut and the back of this sprocket assembly. So after I did that, it took about maybe 4 or 5 hits, and I took the nut off, and the hub assembly came right off. So if you're having trouble trying to get this hub assembly off of the axle, and you don't want to mess it up, try that. that's pretty much complete. The only part I didn't show in detail was the neutral return spring part, and it was really important that you mark the orientation when you take this off. This will be different on each unit, depending on if it's a mower, aerator, or what it is. But if you line this stuff up, then you should be able to get it back together right where it's at. I've got the pulley on. I've got the release lever on. And now all I have to do really is put the hub back on the end here. And also I'll have to put the brake, parking brake. This is a parking brake lever, which will be right here. And I have to find out exactly the orientation of it. And I'll wait to put this on and also the hub until I'm done. But that's pretty much it. So now I'm going to bolt it back in the machine, put the hub and the brake lever on, and hook up the auxiliary tank that goes over here, the hose, and I'm going to give it a try. Hopefully this saved me some money, but it did cost me some time. Well, thanks for watching. Hopefully this helps you sort out your problems with a Hydrogear Z 3100 transaxle. Now this is also going to be the same for a 2800, 3100, and similar for a 3200. So that's the overview of it. That's what I found wrong with mine, so I'm going to put it back together. Thanks for watching. Talk to you later.